Sports analytics. It's a technology that has been around for a while. It's got a ton of data to play with, and there's a lot that your business can learn from it. We're here with Jason Hiner, editor-in-chief of TechRepublic, to talk about sports analytics and what you can learn about it for your business, and also how it influences HR and other business functions. Hi, Jason. How you doing?
Hey, good to be here, as always.
So with sports analytics, I kind of look at it as the ultimate people analytics sort of play.
Yeah.
No other employee is measured as much as a sports performer. And you can model a lot of different things, and it really impacts your approaches to basically everything. So what's your take on how sports analytics applies to human resources in the real world?
Yeah, it's a topic you and I batted around for a long time. Going back to Moneyball and the stuff that Major League Baseball did. Major League Baseball has always been pretty sports analytics heavy. Numbers driven. Numbers mattered, from the stuff on the back of baseball cards to the way the talent was evaluated. But there were a lot of things. There were a lot of intangibles that weren't really measured. There was a lot of conventional wisdom that has filtered through the years. And the cool thing in the past couple decades is that being able to take data and measure things and then apply some algorithms to it, apply some some business smarts to it, and measure these things have really given us some conclusions that fly in the face of a lot of the conventional wisdom, the old ways of doing things in sports. And certainly that has the same potential implications, in business. We saw, in Moneyball, one of the big things, for example, there were a lot of takeaways when they really applied all this real data crunching to baseball. And what they found was in the case of, the Oakland A's and those guys, they found that stealing bases really was not a good thing to do. So they essentially never tried to steal bases, because most of the time it worked against you rather than actually helping you. And there were a lot of things like that. And for businesses, they've learned now that we have a lot of things that we can measure and manage. Once you can measure it, once you can, then you can manage it, then you can, optimize it. And businesses are finding out there are a lot of things, conventional ways of doing things, be it with supply chain, with the ways that you evaluate talent, the ways that you hire, the ways that you manage your people, that are a lot different than the conventional wisdom. And so because of that, it's changing a lot of the game. And really I think, we've talked about this before, we're just at the beginning of this, very beginnings of this. It's going to have big implications, obviously, in sports, for the ways players are drafted, the ways that you sign players, the value you attached to them and their contracts, to the ways that, same things for companies, the ways that you hire, the ways you recruit, the ways that you manage and form and organize your teams. So all of that stuff, there's a lot to learn.
Yeah, I think the other thing with the people analytics is that it allows you to connect these diverse data sets. So like your stealing example, or if you see another thing in baseball, you see these teams doing this, basically relief pitchers the whole game.
Yeah.
So it does lead to these other strategies. I think the other thing that's interesting about it is that you can connect the sports performance with your operational data too. So you're seeing the San Francisco 49ers. They're looking at how their stadium operations are running, so they give a good experience during a game. And that'll allow them to course correct when the 49ers are winning and when they're also losing, right? So you can sort of figure out how to do that thing. And I also think in the future, from a people analytics thing, I think we're going to get to the point where you watch more intangibles. So say you sign a quarterback who is sort of middle of the road, yet is a great pitch man in the stadium. Maybe he goes on that big screen and he can just pitch you the highest priced craft beer there is. Or maybe he gets you to do that gourmet hot dog over that other hot dog. So when you look at that, that could actually become part of the contract value, really, right? So you kind of see where this goes a little bit, where, you know, the
Yeah.
ROI on an employee or an athlete could really change based on how well they pitch as well as how well they perform.
So being able to manage a lot more of these intangibles that we never really did before. And in some cases, we undervalued certain qualities and we overvalued certain other ones. That's what we're kind of coming to. A lot of this stuff that was a more inexact science in the past, especially when it relates to talent, is becoming more of a real science now. That's probably a good way to maybe sum it up.
Right. So what do you think businesses can learn about risk as they use analytics?
Yeah, that's been one of the most interesting things to me, I think, especially if you look at last year, the Philadelphia Eagles, we saw them deploying analytics in some really powerful ways. And we've talked with the company that helped them in their analytics, that run and manage their analytics and operationalize their analytics. And so what they've done is, it's, again, there were kind of some of these old patterns, best practices, kind of myths that were out there about the ways that you run a team, the ways that you sort of, manage your operations. One of them was in football, going for it on fourth down. Teams didn't do it very often. You saw the Patriots at different times do it a little bit. They were maybe the most considered kind of the most reckless of the group that sort of would try this once in a while, but not systematically. Whereas last year you saw with the data that the Eagles had, they saw that the risk factor of going for it on fourth down was far worth it. So they actually had broken it down to the fact of, if you go for it on fourth down with 2 yards or less, inside the 50-yard line, your chances of winning the game actually go up by a certain percentage versus go down. So they started going for it on a lot more fourth downs. And we saw it even in the Super Bowl last year where they beat the Patriots. There were a couple really key fourth downs where they just ran some stable, steady plays that are in their playbook, got first downs and controlled the ball and kept the Patriots off the field and eventually won the game. So what used to be considered high risk was actually a lot lower risk, and in some cases is actually more beneficial. And that's what data is doing, right? It's changing it's changing some of our risk perspectives for companies when you can look at this data and use it for predictive analytics, for prescriptive analytics, where you're using it to understand potential outcomes and then manage that risk much, much more intelligently than you could before. And so that's pretty powerful, and it certainly has huge implications for beyond football for lots of different companies too.
Yeah, I think from a business sense, that sort of application of analytics will probably mean you may take some routes that wouldn't be, conventionally they were thought to be silly.
Yeah.
You might recruit employees a lot differently, right? So maybe your returns are way better on that state school than is the Ivy League, or just sort of the pockets of people you look for. Because I think the analytics, I think we're going to get to the point, certainly in sports, where we're going to measure things like mindfulness, we're going to measure resiliency, all those things that matter in certain sports like golf, baseball. You need to stay calm. You can't get all wound up.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to change a lot too. I think the other thread here is, given sports has so much data, like I'm increasingly coming across companies that, they had sort of a previous business that gave them a lot of data and how things work. And then they've turned that into a new product, basically using AI. So like ZipRecruiter, they used to just give you a ton of names, ton of resumes, and that was the return, right? It was very transactional.
Yeah.
So then they go, all right, so we're now with all that data, and they've had years of experience watching how this stuff works. They can basically whittle that down to the point where they give you like 5 good people or 5 good things to choose from. And I think that's where, the sports analogy plays out too, because I think, there's so much data out there already, years and years back, that I think it's going to be able to model things much better. You're going to be able to project how people will do. And I'm kind of surprised it's not there yet for sports. But I can see companies getting into that too, right? So I see as more data is out there, like, I don't know, how could you can definitely mine LinkedIn for, predictions of how somebody would do. I think you can look at university transcripts and sort of make those models and projections too. So it gets interesting. And that's where I think, sports will probably lead the way on that because they already have all that data laying around. So they'll know how that point guard from, Big Ten school will do over his career. So it's just fascinating to watch, but I totally expect AI to become more in this mix at some point.
Definitely. You look at, I think to your point about sort of state school versus Ivy League is a good one. You're going to see it in sports where it's like, here's a free agent, versus a draft pick that you use to fill this, hole. You're probably going to get a little bit more production out of that free agent, but you're going to overpay for it. So versus that draft pick, that you might, or maybe a lesser free agent that's going to get a certain amount of production, and starting to predict some of that and use some of those other factors too, like you're talking about, like resiliency, maybe even, attitude or ability to function under high pressure situations, their performance in pressure situations, getting some data around those things. And I think you're going to see sports do that. We're already seeing smart teams kind of do that value equation well. And a lot of the ones that, do well over time, they tend to do that real well. And you're going to see that from a employer standpoint, where it's like, okay, yeah, you could go and recruit some of these Ivy League positions, but here's some people that might be undervalued that have applied to your position, and their likely contribution is going to be this, but the value, you're going to get out of it is going to be significant because you're going to pay less. You're going to pay whatever, a third less, a half less than somebody that, comes from, a higher pedigree sort of school, or maybe has more experience and so is going to demand a higher salary. So those are the kinds of things that are going to be really, really interesting to watch over the next decade as we, we're going to have this, heat up on certain positions, especially things that relate to data, some of these topics we're talking about, and developers and other things where, there's a lot of demand and it's costing companies a lot to get that talent they need to compete in the digital age.
All right. Thanks for joining us.